Hello, it's day 3 at the CZI Congress, and important discussions continue to happen in the main auditorium while the three of us are hanging out and misbehaving. And as you can see, we've already started to impart some damage to a bottle of whiskey. And every once in a while, we find an important person to distract, like Mucha here. And believe me, these are important people who know what they're talking about, so you should take them seriously. Welcome to the show, Mucha.
Thank you. I don't know who you're talking about, but yeah, since you're looking at me.
He's a CZI Vice President, owner of Pulse. Is it Pulse Pharmaceuticals or Pulse Group?
Pulse Group.
You do a lot of pharmaceutical.
Yeah. So we've got a couple of businesses. We do pharmaceuticals under Pulse Pharmaceuticals. We've got a company called PAM that does generics out of India. We've got Pulse Surgical Care, which is everything you see in the theatre. We've got Pulse Tech, which is labs, etc. We've got Podium, which is supermarkets, so Imperial Leather, Lager Tea, Cerebos, salts, and also we supply mining chemicals.
So you're a veritable mogul.
I'm not sure what that is. I'm inclined to say no. But
Well, anyway, welcome to the show.
thank you.
You're having something pink there. What is that?
I couldn't tell you. Not sure actually. They gave it to me, and it looks nice. I haven't tasted it yet. I will. But for now, I'm having water with my colleagues.
So, actually, what are you having?
Somebody decided to steal our tea.
Why
I
would
have my
anybody steal
suspicions.
such a boring drink?
I have my suspicions, but it's okay. So we'll start the show with water, and then we'll pick it up later on in the day.
You're not wearing socks.
No, I'm not.
Okay, no.
so in
I'd like to
interest-
hear. I'd like to hear your explanation because usually you don't wear socks because it's hot.
Okay.
It's not hot today. So what's your story?
Okay, all right. So in November, it's actually a very important day for Ralph Lauren. So this is the 54th year of Ralph Lauren. And as a fan, I'm wearing his tie because he started off as a tie maker. So every November, we celebrate Ralph Lauren. So that's the look I'm actually going with. This is a Ralph Lauren summer look. So that's
But it's
why.
cold. Why are you not wearing socks?
I said because I'm going and I'm being true to the Ralph Lauren look.
Did he also wear oversized pants?
I'm not so sure about what you mean by oversized. Unless you're paying.
You better roll them up.
No. Oh my gosh. This is a turnout.
Yeah.
It's called a cuff. It's called a cuff.
It makes sense to me. I don't know.
I don't
Are
know.
you not following?
It's called a cuff.
Anyway,
What are you and me drinking?
yes, we're drinking as always something much more interesting than Tinashe, a product of the 16 men of Attain, Glenmorangie. This one is a 14-year-old. It's aged in American oak, and the interesting color comes from
gotta love the color,
ruby port casks. So it's aged in 2 casks, and so it's finished off in a ruby port cask, and that's where you get the color. And it's not chill filtered, so it looks cloudy when you add ice to it and chill it. It's a lovely tipple, and on our last day here, I thought we ought to drink something, some of the good stuff. Perhaps Mucha will join us later on.
Perhaps.
We'll try and tempt you. Cheers. So, before the show started, you
Yeah.
said a very interesting thing,
Yeah.
and you got Tinashe all excited.
Okay.
You're a chief.
My father's a chief, and I'm his son. So,
But
and I must tell you, the word. So,
Move to
so-
another house.
that's a very good point. But anyway,
Like,
okay.
why are you inheriting your father's throne?
So
I
it-
thought
it-
it would move to
yeah.
a different house.
Good question.
That's not how Shona throws.
So first of all, the
you
word
Shona?
I am Shona, but first of all, the word chief, I'm not very comfortable with,
You prefer to be called a king.
A king.
and king, yeah. And so the reason we started calling ourselves chiefs was because when we were colonized, the colonizer didn't want us to use his titles. lest we start thinking we are kings and lords
Fair enough, yeah.
and princesses.
I agree
So,
with you.
so the word chief was a word that was used to contain us, as it were. We've accepted it, but there's a little bit of there's some debate around it. And actually, continuous use of the word chief doesn't actually show the history. But to your question, so some families do father, son, father, son.
Sorry, before we go there,
Yeah.
which, I won't say chieftainship, which kingdom are we talking about?
So it's okay. So basically, it's part of the Duma kingdom, and I'm from the Mukanganwi family. All right. So we've got a family tree that goes up about 400 years. And my first name is Mucha, which is now about a 10th iteration.
Mukanganwi.
Life is good.
I'm not so sure that's what George had in mind.
It's because he doesn't understand Shona. But go ahead.
I take great offense. Anyway, yes, so you're Duma,
Yeah.
and your chieftainship is Chief
Mukanganwi.
Mukanganwi.
Yeah.
Waira
Moyo.
Dewa.
Moyo Sahi. Gonora Mtindi.
Okay, can you detember the whole thing?
Most of it, but I think we'll stop there for now.
So anyway, so coming to the question.
Yeah.
So most Shona thrones or stools, sounds wrong when you call it a stool, but anyway,
It's all right.
you don't inherit vertically.
Yeah. So it's the traditions. So we've inherited vertically, except once. There was one of my fathers, his son slept with his wife.
No. Okay, his son sleeping with his wife is not unusual, but his son sleeping with his father's wife.
Yeah, his son slept with his father's wife. Because you know the guys used to have more than
Younger,
Yeah.
wife.
younger wife.
That's
That's
nothing
the-
unusual.
Well,
It's
I think you
unusual
could-
in the context
you
of
could- I could
modernity,
be,
but in terms of the tradition or the
Yeah, I mean, imagine you have Solomon in the Bible or wherever, and the younger wife would probably be 18, 19, and he's 17,
25, 30, 40.
30, 40, and the younger son or one of the sons would be more or less the same age.
Exactly.
Yeah, and they would
So-
have a lot more in common.
So son, one of your ancestors sleeps with his father's younger
And
wife.
that's the only time it skipped.
What did it skip?
Him.
Okay, so okay, is there a short
No,
word
that
for such an offense?
It's not an offense.
It's not an offense, right?
Asma kuna kuna.
You know, the king found it offensive.
All right. Yeah, so it
He
was,
was offended.
Yeah, it was a personal upfront. Not,
Yeah. Look, I don't know. I'm
Asma
not
kuna
sure.
kuna.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry?
Asma kuna kuna. It's not taboo.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not incest,
Yeah.
but I can't say it's not taboo.
No, because
Because we would have a word for it.
the Shona for taboo is makuna kuna. Well, okay, sexual taboo is makuna kuna.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't speak Shona. Yeah. And that doesn't qualify under makuna kuna. I mean, it would be interesting to have a proper traditionalist on the show one day.
Yeah.
But go
Great
ahead.
idea.
Go ahead.
Love that. So to answer your question, so some households are from family to family, but ours have always done it that way.
Really.
So it's the tradition. Yeah.
So you're waiting for your time.
I am.
So whereabouts exactly in Bikita? Because you know there's gold in Bikita.
Do you know Nika, Growth Point?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, Nika.
Yeah. So
There's
so
lithium.
Nika,
There's a big pile of lithium right next to the growth point.
there's a lot of lithium around that whole area.
Yeah.
And
Bikita Minerals. Bikita. Yes, you're quite right. Yeah, you're quite right.
It's from there.
Yeah. That's
So what are you doing in the city?
well, my father moved to the city.
So he rules from the city.
You know what? So this is now because he was actually a professor at the University of Zimbabwe, and his brother used to do the courts.
The regent.
That's it. Yeah. Good way of putting it. Yeah. Because he delegated that, and I've grown up in the city. Yeah.
So are you gonna go back? Or are you going to appoint
It's also
a regent?
There's
Nikita.
Yes, and he's the chief.
I guess you shouldn't. Again, in our culture, you don't speak of the living. You don't. The king is still alive. So
Okay. So we talked about sleeping with your father's wife is not an offense.
my father's got one wife, and she's my mother. So
Okay,
I think we're safe. I think we're safe.
I'm not about to suggest that.
We're doing
but
good.
you know that killing your father or willing your father dead is not an offense either.
I didn't know that.
Apanangos.
Really?
No. If you think it's time.
Really?
I do know this.
No, I didn't know
Apanangos
this,
if
and
you
I
think
think this is probably quite debatable.
All right. Pakanspaning goes. Unoripan.
His brothers.
Who is you? You're going to be sitting on both
No,
sides of
fathers.
the
Look,
You know
dialogue.
what?
brothers.
You may be right, but it doesn't sound right.
It's not a very palatable thought.
No, it doesn't sound right. No.
No, Much doesn't sound like he's in a hurry to take over that kingdom. He's pretty busy with his own
Kingdom.
that he's built from scratch.
Trying to build something.
And perhaps, that's an interesting segue into matters business.
Okay.
So, your father had this kingdom, literally,
Yeah.
in the village, but he left and came to the city, presumably for greater things. Isn't that an interesting parallel with how our business community thinks, right? So everybody's got their little empire. And we've talked many times on this show about expanding beyond our borders, having a bigger vision. Yesterday we spoke to one or two guests about the middle income economy vision, and is that vision big enough?
Okay.
What do you think makes the difference between those that stay in the village and those that leave?
I think middle income is big enough because remember, it's a step. And
That's what Busisa said.
yeah.
yesterday.
So with anything, whether it's running a company, you start with steps, and then if it's a step one, you get to that step. It's an important step, and it's not an easy step to become a middle income country. Once you've achieved that, then you set the next step. What we try to do, we talked about this earlier. If you look at the conversations we're having around manufacturing for manufacturing, I was sharing that I used to pay Rufaro to come and shout at us when I was at CAPS. Many years ago, I was CEO of CAPS, about 19 years ago.
Wow.
So Rufaro used to come and basically prepare us for our AGMs,
Yeah.
briefings. He really did an excellent job. Because you always felt some type of way when he was done with you. But in terms of the conversation, becoming a middle-income country, and also my journey as an entrepreneur, I've always known where I want to go to. But I've always understood that, if you set a target that's not achievable, the people around you can't buy into it, right? And you don't walk alone. So you want things that people around you can touch and engage. We achieve it, and then as a visionary, you set the next stage.
But aren't the truly great entrepreneurs and visionaries those who have visions that initially sound impossible? So if you think about a guy like Steve Jobs, they talk about him having a reality distortion field around him, that he would come up with something that all the engineers thought was impossible, but he somehow managed to inspire them to believe that they could do it, and then this is how they ended up doing great things. So are we not in danger?
Well, he threatened to fire them if they didn't.
But are we not in danger of being too modest and meek and humble?
Okay.
Instead of
I think those are two different questions. And from what he's talking about, I think part of it has to do with him turning 50. Possibly.
Yeah, but go ahead.
Why are you telling the whole world his age?
Well, it was something
I
that
love-
he shared before,
I'm very happy
why
I'm 50.
it's important. Because Plato has an idea around turning 50. And he says that you can only start ruling, becoming a chief or whatever kingdom at 50. That's the only time you become a philosopher king. And where it was coming from, 50, was between 0 and 18,
Yeah.
you're learning from
Yeah.
your forebears.
Yeah.
And then between 18 and 30 something, you're learning a skill. Then between 30 and 50, you are testing the world, what works and what doesn't work. And the idea is you make your money, this is a good example. And at 50, you're not interested in or concerned about, life and wealth, but you're now more interested in the next generation.
Yeah.
So you can actually think about it. So you're now thinking generationally. And if you're thinking generationally, there's no way you're gonna, go from one lip to the next because you're afraid of making mistakes. So you're better off making those small changes, small steps in society, so that you can live for the next generation to also continue.
Yeah.
So that it becomes, that's the continuity
Yeah.
between one generation and the next. So I think the big audacious goals are for guys in their 30s. You can afford to make a mistake, but I think for guys who are older, who are now philosopher kids, they see things beyond the next generation.
So can I
you
respond to
answering the
that?
question?
No, I want to respond to that.
Because
I want to
I
respond to
wanted
that because I agree. So when I used to work with Faro, I was quick to fire. I was quick to do a lot of things, and I'm not so quick to fire. Now I want to help someone. I want to grow someone. I'm very interested in things that I used to do more shoot from the hip. And so I left my job when I was 33. And I was fearless. And I started my company with $5,000. And I used to drive actually to South Africa and pick up product and bring it back and sell it, pick up product and so on. You couldn't tell me how big the world or how small the world was. I had no intention of that. But what I wanted to say, to something that you said, so entrepreneurs shape the truth, right? And
Shape the truth.
right, and what does that mean, right? So if we go and we look at this table, right, and I ask you, what do you see? Right, you might see a table, you might see a round table, you might see
I see drinks.
might see drinks, but someone might see a billion-dollar industry of tables in China. That because he really likes the look of this table, right? So then the person who sees $1 billion worth of sales in China, because we've all seen the same thing, right? Then he starts to shape the truth for people around him. Now, because I said that, I hope you guys have started to see,
Billion-dollar industry.
right? So I've shaped a truth, right? When we go to a table, a field, right? Some guy might see dirt, and another person might see a farm. Another person might see exports of baked beans into Brazil.
Another guy might see black granite
That's right. That's
in
right.
homeless villages.
But then once he does that, whatever that person sees, right? The next step is to shape the truth so that those around him can also see it. So I think I agree. There were two questions, which I agree, and I liked.
None of this has anything to do with the original question I asked, by the way. But anyway, carry on.
does.
Carry
It
on.
does.
Carry on. I'm just here
Got
for the ride.
distracted. Eh?
Yeah, carry on. It's an interesting
So I
discussion.
think your question was, is it big enough? I think it's good. So when we started looking at Zimbabwe, and talking about caps, right? One of the jobs I did there was I was FD of the factory, the big factory. There's two caps factories. Well, there were two caps factories. I used to buy the carton from Zim, the leaflet from Zim, the bottle from Zim, the lid from Zim, right? I would probably import very little, maybe 15%. The actual excipient, the thing that makes you better. That's what I would import. Now, if you were in yesterday's presentation,
Yeah, 90%.
90%. So the industries we have actually are so, food. When you see food on the shelf, we're very proud of that. But 76% of food in Zim is imported. Anything you see on the shelf. So the reason there's two reasons we've lost the middle. The first one is that it's hard in the middle because that's where innovation exists. That's where you have to remain current. That's where you have to, be competitive.
Cheaper, better.
Yeah. So remember, the people who are innovating and thinking are investing a lot of money in R&D, right? So now we then decided to piggyback off other people's R&D. That's why Hunyani closed, right? Because you can make craft paper at a fraction of what Hunyani used to do, but Hunyani didn't reinvent themselves. So that's where we're starting. So let's reimagine the middle, where it's hard. It's hard at the middle, right? Business to consumer is actually a lot easier because someone has dealt with the competitive issues in the middle. But if we don't crack the competitive issues, and that's what
Consumers
this.
are very
But
emotional.
but Mucha isn't.
They're very logical. They have to make logical decisions.
But also Mucha. I mean, my family's invested in a small textile business, and we're at the end we do business to consumer.
You mean your wife?
Well, okay. I won't say anything that'll get me in trouble. Yeah.
Are you suggesting his wife is not part of the family?
No, the way he made it sound, because we were talking about cheese and.
You just shaped the
You
truth.
know my dad. No. Okay. It's
Absolutely.
But anyway, can I make my point? But anyway, one of the things. So we're doing business to consumer, and we started there because it's cheaper. And when we know we must do the middle part, but the middle part is a lot more expensive, and we're not sure there's scale to justify that investment.
There's a lot of risk there.
Yeah. If we make that investment, it's going to take us 20, 25 years to pay it back. But
the scale is there if you move
but-
away from Zimbabwe.
Yeah, so in fact, there you go. So it's how you viewed the problem, right? 1, 2, you're also scared that you will buy a machine that will be relevant in 3, 4, 5 years' time,
Yes.
right?
yes,
And that's part of the ecosystem that we live in. So we're saying, let's now discuss this ecosystem. We have to change it. So that people like you, whether or not what you go into the investment, you're not afraid that you'll become irrelevant, that your investment will lose scope, and that should things change, the ecosystem that is Zimbabwe will be moving with you. So
The process is actually sharing the costs.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of the R&D costs, let's say for your business, you have to meet them yourself. But if you can share that cost with other people, with other Zimbabwean businesses, I think the Japanese do that brilliantly, or at least when they were still developing, they did that brilliantly.
100%.
Where they would share, South Korea, again, they would share the R&D costs. You spread the costs, and you come up with all those innovative ideas, and then
I'm excited.
The motor industry
consumer,
should do this.
the consumer or the business to consumer is usually the branding, right? But the engine is usually the same. So a motorbike is the same.
Do you know why I'm excited?
Yeah, but
This is the conversation we wanted people to be having and engaging with at the end of the Congress.
all right.
So the fact that you're already
Thinking like
discussing and
that.
thinking like this, asking questions, talking about your family business, and asking these questions is what we're trying to ignite over the last 3 days.
And okay, I mean, I like what Tinashe is saying, and what I like about what the Japanese did, the kiretsus. So it's a lot more difficult to get Mucha and Caps and Varikim to collaborate than if you create a kiretsu, which is a team of businesses that are complementary but not competing. So there are certain raw materials. So let's go back to the craft paper, known as khaki paper to the rest of humanity.
Yeah, it's a good word for khaki.
There is probably 5 or 6 different kinds of businesses that need craft paper. And if you go and get a supermarket chain, for example, they probably need khaki paper for their bags. You go and speak to Busisa, he probably needs it to wrap his cooking oil. And 4 or 5 others. You're not competing, but you have a common interest in making the khaki paper factory work. And now you've got a team that's going to invest in that. And that team can also now have a common interest in having a bank that is functional. Let's capitalize that bank. Let's have an internet service
an
provider.
ecosystem.
Yes.
So craft paper, we import, because craft paper is also cardboard. So it's the all the brown papers, the browns, right? We import $32 million worth of craft paper a year.
And there's a viable business.
Worldwide, craft paper is one of the biggest intermediary products, right? So again, Rockefeller, Rockefeller said, imagine an important industry, then imagine an important activity in that industry, and then see where you can play, right? So if it doesn't tick those three boxes, don't do it. So as you start thinking about your family business, right, you've got to tick all those three questions, right? Craft paper, great. If we can make it, you can export it. We can export $200 million worth of craft paper from Zimbabwe. So whatever happens to Zim is actually relevant. And your payback.
And it's a
what you
very
talked about.
basic
That's
raw
right.
material, right? I
That's
think
right.
you just chop down gum trees and
Yeah, it
turn
is,
them into pulp.
it is, yeah. But the way we want to do craft paper, so craft paper, the new technology is to use the hemp of cotton and actually
Cannabis.
Cannabis, yeah. So the stalk of cotton and the cannabis, so the byproducts is how they're making craft paper these days. And we're trying to get people to grow more cotton in Zimbabwe.
I thought you were going to say we're trying to get people to grow more cannabis.
You know, about framing,
We are that as well. So.
framing the problem. Just to disagree a bit, because this is becoming boring. So we need a bit of...
We can't agree all the time. There
Yeah, we
go.
can't agree all the time. You know, you talked about a $32 million industry. You're doing exactly what Ian Smith was doing, looking inward.
Okay.
Shouldn't
No,
the
but he did.
starting point...
No, but then you said it
But
can
we
be
can
200
export
million.
$200 million worth.
Well, you're now competing with the South Africans, with the Chinese and everybody, right? And they're also asking exactly the same questions that Rockefeller posed.
Yeah.
And then they have the capital at a much cheaper rate. And I think that there's something in the world, there's something in SADC, there's something in Africa. We don't know what it is. We probably need to invest in finding out what it is that can give them a niche. So let me give you an example. Not that I'm saying that that's what we must do, but I think the VP actually picked it up when he went to Dubai and he saw blueberry from Zimbabwe. And for whatever reason, the world loves our blueberries. And for whatever reason, they only grow in this particular climate, and South Africa has a competitive disadvantage in growing blueberries.
Well, that's not factual, but okay.
Well, okay,
But let's
you get
assume you're
my
right.
argument,
Yes.
You get my argument. So I think that where you can collaborate as an industry is finding out those products that are very unique to Zim, that the world needs.
You know the best.
Probably that's what we
But
need.
that sounds,
you know the
that
best
sounds,
example.
That sounds so prescriptive.
No. I don't know what it is. It's not prescriptive. They were prescriptive. I don't know
Find
what
something
it is.
that
I
nobody
don't
else
know what
can
it
do
is
as well
that
as
the
you.
rest of the world.
Yeah. So,
But
so I was going to say that I think that I believe in more rather than less. So I think we must do that, 100%. Right? But we
I was
must do
hoping you
more.
would disagree.
No,
But we must do
and
more.
I think I know where the far is going, and I think
So let me sorry, before you come in. So if you look at countries like Singapore, right, who are, I think they refine the most oil in the world, or one of the top refiners in the world of oil.
Yeah.
Right.
They are.
If they'd sat there and they said, let's think about what we're good at and what is natural to us, oil would never have been an answer.
No, it would have been because Singapore is a trade route, has always been a trade route.
So
That's where it was stemming
So
from.
you see what you've done there is you've created a possibility, right? So all I'm asking is allow the entrepreneurs, because we're not prescribing, let them find possibility
All right,
where
fair
perhaps we can't see it.
Yeah, so you
That's
touched
what
on
it
something
is.
quite important, and I think he alluded to it when he was talking about his family business.
apparently it's my wife's business.
No, it's a family business. We've established, we've agreed,
I'm going to be politically correct.
Thank you.
and call it a family business.
because you're friends of that family.
So I one of the reasons why Silicon Valley is where it is because failure is, people can bounce back from failure quite easily, and capital formation is also quite easy. Right? Whereas here in Zim, if you put your savings into a business, into an entrepreneurial project, and you fail, right, it's likely that you will never bounce back. That nobody is ever going to step up and give you a check for your next project. So there's less experimentation in the entrepreneurial space in Zimbabwe because of the environment that we're in. And if we change that, you'd have people running all kinds of experiments across the breadth of the economy.
Yeah.
And, you'll be amazed what would actually grow and become a material and important business. But because we don't have that experimentation, we're very conservative and we are very averse to risk.
So you know what?
But you know one of the roots of that problem. After a show a couple of weeks ago about savings, I look at that problem a little bit differently. Yes, we have a lot of problems in the system. We have a lot of infrastructure problems and so on. But I think at the core of it is we don't have savings. So if you have a big pile of savings, so if you're a fund manager sitting with a big pile of money and you've got to earn a return, you are more likely to take risks with that money. But if the capital, you must. It's your job, and that's
So
the situation in America.
can I talk
But
to
if the
that?
capital itself
Yeah.
is scarce,
Yeah.
nobody's going to take a risk on anything that's never been
You
proven.
have to take a risk on yourself. So there's a first. You're quite right. So in Zim, you've got two choices.
Agreeable fella.
Right? No, I'll explain why. So in Zim, you can either engage with that challenge, and then you get paralyzed by it, or you have to say, I have to create my own venture capital. So essentially, if I look at my own business, right, even if you look at the Masawaras, right, you came before us, but now if you see what they're doing, they use their own businesses to run their own venture capital, right?
It's an ecosystem.
So that's what I now have to do, right? But when you start, you have to accept that it is what it is, right? And you have to accept that, the $10,000 that you've been given, right? You have to sweat it, and you have to build credibility around that. It might take longer, but it's the reality of what we have.
No, but Mucha, what Rufaro is saying. So let's go back to you starting your business with $5,000.
Yeah.
And driving your Box Sunny or whatever car you had at the time.
It was a Ford Bantam.
Your Ford Bantam, South Africa, and buying stuff.
Yeah.
The first time you got in that car, you had an idea, you had done some homework. You thought, if I go to South Africa with my $5,000 and I go to this company and buy this stuff, I'll come back, cross the border, and sell it for more than $5,000.
Yeah.
What if there had been one small error in your assumptions and you got to the border and Zimra took your stuff and burnt it?
I would have looked for another 5,000. But then
And that's the
5,000
point, is how easy is it to get the next
5,000 is a good number because it's not a big number. So I'll tell you, if you speak to young people in Zimbabwe, they talk about 2 million, 3 million, 100,000, 500,000. They get paralyzed because they believe they can't do anything without a small amount of money. And that's what I'm talking about. So you can get $5,000.
Do you know who else started with $5,000?
Yeah.
Just another historical anecdote. I'll give you a clue. It was 1948.
Okay, $5,000 in 1948 and $5,000 now.
Yeah,
I'm 50 years old. It was close to 1948 when I started. So.
Do you know? No. Tiny Roland.
Oh, there you go.
When he came to this country,
He had $5,000.
he didn't have a Ford Bantam. He actually had a Mercedes.
Okay.
And he crossed the Bite Bridge, the border post,
Yeah.
and he had $5,000. And then he grew it, using your examples, he grew that 5,000 to one of the largest conglomerates in the world. And again, it was just building an ecosystem where the financing, everything, the venture capital, everything was just around.
Came together.
Yeah.
Great.
And
So I think change, it's not for everyone. Some people are big at the big deals. Some people are one brick at a time. I'm definitely one brick at a time.
I'm actually writing an essay on entrepreneurship. And one of the critical things I debate, it's exactly what you're saying. It's the big entrepreneurs definitely are the type that Rufaro speaks of. But the majority of entrepreneurs are the type that you one brick at a time. And the reality is most entrepreneurs, the Koofman Foundation has done studies on this. Most entrepreneurs are 40-year-olds, most startup entrepreneurs are 40 years old, and have 10 years experience in a particular industry that they've been in, and they just want to change just one little thing that their boss or organization just had no clue about, or we're not interested.
That's a Strive story, isn't it?
No, that's not the Strive story. Strive is the big audacious.
No, no.
But
No,
that's
Strive went to a conference.
Strive went to a
And
conference.
he was told about mobile technology, and he went and he presented to the
Mobile
PTC board,
technology is the
and they
big
said,
audacious.
and they said, no, we're not doing that.
No.
But he was convinced.
His story.
Good to do it, yeah.
Okay, so remember the original Econet prospectus talked about 20,000 subscribers in their terminal valuation. So his story was simply, these guys don't see it.
Yeah, but in
And it can be
20,000, do you know why it was a big audacious? Because in the DRC, they only had 4,000 subscribers. And he was starting out and saying, I'm going to do 4 times.
So actually, you're just being
that.
deliberately
And
obtuse.
yeah, pedantic as usual.
But it's, yeah.
I was going to use Philip Mucha
Matali.
as an example.
But
Or
same story.
Brick by. No, it's
He
not.
didn't.
They're actually 2 different entrepreneurs. 2 different, same entrepreneur. It's the same journey, but they're different entrepreneurs. Philip is a guy who was at Old Mutual, was doing something, and then he realized that there's a gap, went to his boss, and said, you know what, we just
do
need to
this.
tweak this little thing. Remember, Strive was creating a new industry. Philip was not creating a new industry.
No,
Philip was
you're
just
being
changing
you're
We're
being
gonna go down
pedantic.
a
You're being
rabbit hole.
pedantic.
We don't agree.
You're being pedantic.
But
It's much of a muchness. Yes, now when we look back, the trajectories were different. But at the time, the decision would have been influenced by similar factors.
Okay, so I'll give you another example, and that's what he's speaking to about 5,000. Philip, to start his business, only needed little capital. Strive's capitalization for his original business, Econet, was like something like $50-60 million. The equipment, just the equipment on its own.
Okay.
That's not brick by brick.
You guys don't need me to be disagreeable because you're disagreeable with each other.
And this is a very good place for us, maybe,
Good.
to let you get back into the conference.
Thank you very much.
We've really enjoyed this. I think I speak for
yeah, it
all.
was fantastic. Yeah,
Thank you. I enjoyed it too.
No, we don't shake hands.
don't shake hands.
Don't you work in the health sector?
I've
you
been
vaccinated?
vaccinated. I've got 100% vaccination at my
He's
business.
vaccinated, he is
Thank you very
young,
much.
he does not have comorbidities, he's got
fit.
nothing
We're still
to
on
worry
camera.
about.
Are we still on camera?
We
My
haven't said
apologies.
goodbye yet. Are you that keen to get rid of us?
No.
Well, anyway, it's been lovely having you along. Mucha, we hope we have you again. It's been great.
At our bar, and hopefully you'll be drinking something
Something
more
more
interesting
interesting.
than water and a pink drink.
As usual, COVID is real. Be good. If you can't be good, be good at it.